Amanda and Mark Wheeler had always been the epitome of a successful, loving family. Their story was one that everyone admired. They had met in college, where Amanda was a bright and ambitious young woman, and Mark was a charming, laid-back guy with big dreams. They married soon after graduation and settled into a picturesque home in the suburbs, just a short drive from the city. Their son, Ethan, was their pride and joy, an intelligent and quiet boy who excelled in his studies. He had inherited his mother's sharp mind and his father's calm demeanor. From the outside, they were everything anyone could hope for in a family. The Wheelers were well known in their community for their perfect image annual holiday parties, weekend outings, and regular family updates on social media. Their Instagram feed was full of smiling faces, vacations, and happy moments, yet behind the glowing images was a marriage that wasn't as flawless as it seemed. Amanda, who had once been deeply in love with Mark, had begun to feel distant from him over the years. The excitement of their early relationship had dulled, and the quiet loneliness in her heart was growing louder. She still loved him, but there was an emptiness that had begun to settle in her life, one she couldn't ignore anymore. Ethan had recently come back home after his first year at college, bringing with him a girlfriend named Lily. Lily was everything Amanda could have hoped for in a girlfriend for her son, intelligent, kind, and ambitious. She quickly warmed up to the family, sharing long conversations with Amanda about her life and future goals. It didn't take long for Amanda to see how genuinely in love Ethan and Lily were, and she couldn't help but feel a sense of pride and happiness for them. The couple's bond reminded her of the early days of her own relationship with Mark, but there was something else, something more complicated that was beginning to stir in Amanda's mind. She found herself looking at Lily differently. It wasn't just that Lily was attractive, though she was. It was how easy it was to talk to her, how comfortable she made Amanda feel. They shared secrets and laughed over silly things, and their bond grew stronger with each passing day. Amanda began to enjoy the late-night talks with Lily, moments that felt more genuine than her conversations with Mark had in months. Mark, busy with work, didn't seem to notice how close his wife had become to his son's girlfriend. He assumed it was just a motherly bond, something normal that any woman might experience with a young, bright girl like Lily. But for Amanda, the connection with Lily went beyond that. It wasn't just companionship, it was a longing she couldn't deny. She hadn't felt desired in years, and Lily's attention was a balm to the emptiness Amanda had been struggling with. Their conversations, though innocent on the surface, began to take on a different tone. Amanda found herself thinking about Lily when she wasn't around, replaying their interactions in her mind. It wasn't long before Amanda started to realize the truth. What she felt for Lily was more than admiration. It was attraction, and it scared her. At first, Amanda tried to ignore it. She told herself it was just a phase, a fleeting attraction that would pass with time. But the more she tried to distance herself, the more the desire intensified. Each time they spoke, Amanda couldn't shake the feeling that this wasn't just a passing fancy. It was something deeper, something dangerous. But she had a family, a husband, and a son who adored her. How could she possibly admit to herself what she was feeling? How could she allow herself to want something she couldn't have? As the weeks went by, Amanda's feelings for Lily only deepened, and the guilt she felt began to eat away at her. She knew what she was doing was wrong. Lily was her son's girlfriend, and their bond should have been that of a mother and a mentor, not something more. But the attraction was undeniable. It had started with innocent moments of shared laughter and understanding, but now it had turned into something much darker, something Amanda couldn't control. She was aware of every glance Lily threw her way. The subtle touches, the way their conversations lingered a little too long, and the unspoken chemistry that simmered beneath the surface. Lily, too, seemed to feel the pull. At first, Amanda thought it was just her imagination, but the more they spent time together, the more she realized that Lily's behavior towards her was different from how she treated everyone else. Lily was attentive and affectionate in a way that felt personal, almost intimate. It wasn't just about bonding over shared interests or life experiences. It was a deeper connection that neither of them could ignore. The moments they spent alone together became the highlight of Amanda's day. Their conversations turned from innocent chit-chat to more vulnerable exchanges. Amanda found herself revealing things she had never shared with anyone, not even Mark. The loneliness she had been trying to suppress for years poured out, and Lily listened with an understanding that Amanda hadn't experienced in a long time. For Lily, this wasn't just about friendship either. She had always been attracted to older women, and Amanda was everything she had ever desired. Amanda's beauty, confidence, and maturity were qualities that Lily found irresistible. She had spent her life chasing fleeting relationships with boys her age, but those experiences had never satisfied her in the way she thought they should. When she met Amanda, something shifted inside her. Amanda was different from the other women she had known. She was strong, emotionally intelligent, and most of all, she had a depth that Lily had longed to understand. The attraction was instant, though Lily initially tried to push it aside, knowing it was complicated and wrong. But the more time they spent together, the harder it became to deny what she was feeling. Amanda's guilt intensified, but she found herself growing more and more obsessed. She couldn't stop thinking about Lily. Her heart raced whenever they shared a moment alone, and the feeling of her touch lingered long after their interactions. Amanda tried to tell herself that this was a phase, that it was a fleeting infatuation, but the reality was that she had crossed a line, and there was no going back. The lines between what was appropriate and what was not had blurred, and it was becoming impossible to stop. Lily's attention made Amanda feel alive again, something she hadn't felt in years. Meanwhile, Mark remained oblivious to the growing tension in his home. He had noticed that his wife and Lily were spending a lot of time together, but he didn't think much of it. He assumed it was just a bonding experience between the two women. Mark was focused on his work and didn't pay much attention to the small changes in his wife's behavior, the way she would get lost in thought when she thought no one was watching, or how she would grow tense whenever the subject of Lily came up. He had no idea that his wife was slipping further away from him, drawn into an affair that was both forbidden and all-consuming. The more Amanda tried to keep things under control, the more she realized that there was no way to stop it now. She had fallen for Lily, and the danger of it all only made the feeling more exhilarating. What started as a quiet attraction had become a dangerous obsession, and as Amanda's feelings grew, so did the tension in the house. The lies they told themselves, the secrets they kept, and the feelings they tried to bury were now reaching a breaking point. Amanda knew that things couldn't continue this way for much longer. Something had to give, and she wasn't sure how it would end, but she could feel the storm building, and she wasn't prepared for the devastation it would bring. One evening, Mark came home earlier than usual, his mind preoccupied with the stress of work. He was looking forward to a quiet dinner and perhaps a conversation with Amanda about their upcoming vacation plans, but what he discovered instead shattered the fragile peace that had been holding their family together. As he entered the living room, he noticed Amanda's phone on the coffee table, the screen glowing faintly. He had never been one to invade his wife's privacy, but on that particular evening, something in him felt uneasy. Something wasn't right, and the nagging feeling had been building for weeks. The closeness between Amanda and Lily had grown too intense, too private. He couldn't ignore it any longer. Curiosity got the better of him, and he reached for her phone. At first, he only skimmed the messages, not intending to intrude on anything personal. But one text caught his eye, and his heart sank. It was from Lily. The words were clear and explicit, a confession of feelings that Mark had never expected. Lily was saying things to Amanda that went beyond friendship, things that spoke of desire, longing, and intimacy. It was a message that made Mark's stomach turn, and as he read through the thread, the truth became undeniable. His wife and his son's girlfriend had been having an affair. His first instinct was disbelief. He felt sick, as if the world had suddenly tilted off its axis. He wanted to throw the phone down to scream, but instead he stood frozen, staring at the messages. His mind raced. How could Amanda do this? How could she betray him, betray Ethan? The woman he had shared his life with, the mother of his child, had been lying to him all along. The woman who had always been his partner, his confidante, had been hiding this dark secret. His anger boiled, but there was something else too, a sharp, stabbing sense of betrayal. Mark had always trusted his wife, but now that trust was shattered. The foundation of their marriage seemed to crumble beneath him. He felt as if he had been living in a dream, a carefully constructed lie that he had never questioned. Now reality hit him with the force of a sledgehammer. He needed to confront Amanda, but he didn't know how to approach it. His hands trembled as he placed the phone back on the table and walked out of the room, needing air. He paced around the house, trying to steady himself. His mind was clouded with a mixture of anger, hurt, and confusion. Ethan had always been so fond of Lily, so convinced that she was the one for him. Mark had never thought to question their relationship, never dreamed that someone so close to their family could be capable of such betrayal. How had this gone on for so long without his noticing? How had Amanda and Lily managed to keep their affair hidden? The weight of the situation seemed unbearable. Mark could feel his emotions warring inside him, his love for Amanda still present, but now marred by the ugly truth he had uncovered. He couldn't understand how everything had spiraled out of control so quickly. They had been a family, a solid unit, and now the whole structure felt like it was falling apart. Finally, he took a deep breath and called Amanda. His voice was calm, but underneath it, there was a tension he couldn't disguise. He needed answers. He needed to hear her say it, to admit what he already knew. Amanda picked up the phone, and for the first time in years, Mark felt a cold distance between them. He could hear the nervousness in her voice as they spoke. She sounded distracted, as if she already knew what was coming. And when Mark asked her about the texts, when he told her that he knew about the affair, she didn't deny it. Instead, she paused, her silence loud and deafening. In that moment, Mark realized the truth. Amanda hadn't been planning to confess. She hadn't been waiting for the right time to come clean. No, she had been hiding it from him, keeping it buried for as long as she could. The conversation that followed was a blur. Words were exchanged, but none of them could undo the damage that had already been done. Mark's heart ached with betrayal, but it was the realization that his son's trust had been broken too that struck him hardest. How could Amanda have done this to their family? How could she have let it go on for so long? The following days were filled with tension and confusion. Mark found it hard to look at Amanda without feeling the weight of the lies between them. He couldn't stop replaying the moments in his mind, every glance, every touch, every word that now seemed so loaded with meaning. Nothing was the same anymore. Everything had changed in an instant. And as Mark's anger turned into a quiet, simmering rage, he couldn't help but wonder how far Amanda and Lee had gone, and what they were willing to do to keep their secret safe. The days that followed Mark's discovery were a blur of strained silences and half-hearted attempts at normalcy. The house, once filled with the sounds of laughter and light-hearted conversations, now felt cold and empty. Mark couldn't bring himself to look at Amanda the same way. Every glance, every movement she made seemed to be a reminder of the betrayal. He found himself questioning everything, the life they had built together, the years of shared experiences, the love they had promised to each other. Nothing felt real anymore. Every moment now felt tainted by the affair. But it wasn't just the pain of betrayal that gnawed at him. It was the mounting anger. He couldn't understand why Amanda had done this. Why Lily? And how could she have kept it a secret for so long, right under his nose? It was as if he had been living in a fog, oblivious to the storm that had been brewing inside his home. The realization that Amanda had been planning to leave him for Lily only added fuel to the fire. The very thought of it made his blood boil. She hadn't just made a mistake, she had made a deliberate choice. She had been preparing to abandon him and their son. And for what? A fleeting affair, a fantasy that would never last. Amanda had been vague when they first spoke about it, trying to justify her actions with feeble excuses. She claimed she didn't know how it had happened, that it had started innocently and just escalated beyond her control. But Mark wasn't buying it. The lies, the secrecy, it was all too much. He had always trusted her, and now that trust had been shattered beyond repair. The guilt that Amanda felt was evident in her eyes whenever they spoke, but it was no longer enough to undo the damage. The weight of her deception hung heavy in the air between them. Mark's anger reached a boiling point one night when he found himself standing outside their bedroom door, listening to Amanda's muffled voice on the phone. He didn't need to hear the words. He could tell by her tone that it was Lily. The two of them were still in contact, still plotting behind his back, and the realization hit him hard. Amanda wasn't just holding on to the affair, she was keeping it alive, nourishing it, as though she had no intention of letting go. It was as if she had chosen this path and was willing to sacrifice everything, her marriage, her family, even her son, for it. In his frustration, Mark decided to confront Lily directly. He needed to understand her role in all of this. What had she been thinking? Did she even care about the consequences? He was furious, but he knew he couldn't keep his anger contained forever. He arranged to meet Lily, under the guise of a casual conversation, but he had no intention of letting her walk away unscathed. When they met, Lily was calm, almost too calm, as if she had been expecting this confrontation. She wasn't the nervous girl Mark had imagined. Instead, she was cold and collected, as though she had already made peace with what she had done. There was no remorse in her eyes, no apology for the pain she had caused. In fact, Mark began to realize that Lily wasn't the naive, innocent girl he had once believed her to be. She had orchestrated everything. She had known exactly what she was doing. This wasn't a fling. It had been a calculated move from the start. Lily's attitude only fueled Mark's anger. She didn't seem to care about the damage she had caused. She didn't care about the wreckage she had left behind. In fact, she seemed almost smug, as though she had won some kind of victory. Mark's heart sank as he realized the truth. Lily had never loved Amanda. She had used her as a means to an end. Her real target had always been Ethan, his son. It was in that moment that everything fell into place. The affair had never been about Amanda or Lily's feelings for each other. It had been a strategic move to get closer to Ethan. Lily had known that Amanda and Mark's marriage was faltering, and she had preyed on that weakness. She had inserted herself into their lives, befriended Amanda, and slowly manipulated her emotions. The affair had been a means to an end, a way to get into Ethan's life without suspicion. Mark's blood ran cold as he thought about the devastating consequences this would have on his son, the one person who had no idea what was happening behind closed doors. The realization that Lily had been playing him, playing all of them, hit Mark harder than anything else. This wasn't just about his marriage falling apart, it was about his son's future being threatened by the very person he had trusted. Mark's fury now had a new target. Lily. He knew he couldn't let this go. He needed to protect his family, even if it meant exposing the truth, no matter how painful it would be for everyone involved. He wasn't ready to give up just yet, but he was beginning to realize that in this game of deception and betrayal, there would be no winners. Everyone would lose. And the damage had already been done. The truth, once revealed, rippled through their lives like a tidal wave, leaving devastation in its wake. Mark had hoped that confronting Lily would bring some clarity, some resolution, but instead it had only deepened the chasm between everyone involved. Amanda was no longer the woman he had married. She had been shattered, stripped of her secrets, her emotions raw and exposed. But it wasn't just her. It was Ethan who now carried the heaviest burden of all. Mark hadn't told their son about the affair yet. He couldn't bear the thought of shattering Ethan's trust, of destroying the image of the perfect family they had all worked so hard to create. But he knew the time would come, and soon. Ethan was too perceptive, too intelligent to remain oblivious for long. Mark found himself lost in thought, staring at his son's photo on the mantel, such a sweet, innocent face, unaware of the storm that had been brewing in the house for months. Mark had to decide how to handle the situation, But he knew one thing for certain: he couldn't keep this secret any longer. One evening, as the family sat down for dinner, the tension was palpable. Ethan spoke little, sensing the heavy atmosphere around him, and Mark struggled to make conversation, forcing a smile he didn't feel. Amanda, too, seemed distant, her eyes occasionally darting to Mark, searching for something, perhaps an apology, perhaps understanding. But Mark wasn't ready to give either. He couldn't. There was nothing left between them to salvage, nothing that could undo the hurt that had been caused. The moment came when Ethan finally asked, his voice breaking the uncomfortable silence, "Is everything okay, Dad? You've been acting weird lately." Mark's heart sank as he met his son's gaze. Ethan had always been perceptive, a quality Mark had admired in him from an early age, but now it felt like a curse. He couldn't lie to Ethan, not about this. "Ethan," Mark began, his voice shaky despite his best efforts to stay calm, "there's something I need to tell you. It's about your mom and Lily." The words felt like a foreign language as they left his mouth, and Mark saw the color drain from Ethan's face. His son was no fool. The shock that followed was immediate, and then came the hurt. Ethan's eyes widened, disbelief clouding his features. He looked from Mark to Amanda, his expression a mixture of confusion and anger. He wanted to understand, but he couldn't. "Is this some kind of joke?" Ethan asked, his voice barely above a whisper. But Mark could see it the way his son was beginning to connect the dots. It was as though the reality of it all hit him in an instant, and Mark knew there was no way to undo what had already been said. The weight of the truth was pressing down on all of them now, and there was no escaping it. Amanda broke the silence, her voice soft, almost broken. "Ethan, I never meant for this to happen. I never wanted to hurt you." But her words only seemed to make the situation worse. Ethan's gaze shifted away from her, his eyes filled with disappointment. "You're lying," he said, his voice barely audible, though there was a sharpness to it that cut through the room. "You've been lying this whole time, haven't you? All of this, everything was a lie." Tears welled up in Amanda's eyes, but she didn't speak. She knew there was no point in trying to explain herself now. There was no excuse for what she had done. The look on Ethan's face was enough to make her feel as though her heart had been ripped from her chest. Mark felt that same ache. They had both failed their son in the worst possible way, and now the damage was irreparable. As the evening wore on, Ethan became more distant. He couldn't look at either of them the same way. His trust had been shattered, and the foundation of their family had crumbled. Mark watched helplessly as his son retreated to his room, his footsteps heavy, as if carrying the weight of the world on his shoulders. Amanda remained in the kitchen, her hands trembling as she cleaned up. There were no words left between her and Mark, none that mattered. What could they say now? Everything had been exposed. The affair, the lies, the manipulation. Their lives had been forever altered, and the path ahead was unclear. What was left of their marriage? What was left of their family? The truth had been a cruel, unrelenting force, one that left no room for healing, at least not right away. There was no quick fix, no easy solution to what had been broken. Mark knew they would all need time, but deep down, he feared that time alone wouldn't be enough to repair the rift that had been created. No apology, no tearful conversation could undo the damage done to Ethan's heart, to Amanda's trust, and to the fragile ties that had once held them all together. And so they sat in the silence of their broken home, uncertain of what the future held. What had been a family was now a fractured collection of people, each of them grappling with their own pain and regret. What was left of their lives together could never be the same again.